1998 was colder than usual in the small town of Hollow Creek, the kind of cold that carried whispers through the trees. The sound of leaves crunching could send shivers down your spine. On the edge of town stood Carter's Mill, an old wooden structure that had been abandoned since the 1960s after a tragic fire claimed the lives of two workers. Everyone in town knew the story how the fire had started in the lower floor, trapping the men inside. But what people didn't talk about was the legend that followed, that every autumn, when the first fog rolled over the fields, you could still hear them screaming for help. No one believed it anymore. That was until for friends Eddie, Sarah, Mike, and Laura decided to test it one October evening. They were all seniors, full of arrogance and curiosity. "Let's record it for Halloween," Mike had said, his camera already in hand. The four drove out just as the sun began to set, orange light slicing through the fog that hung thick around the trees. The road to Carter's Mill was narrow and uneven. As the car came to a stop, all they could hear was the soft whisper of wind brushing through the dry leaves. Inside the mill, it was darker than expected. The old wooden beams creaked with every step, and the air smelled of rot and something, metallic something, that made Laura's stomach turn. They laughed nervously, trying to shake off the eerie feeling. "We should go upstairs," Eddie suggested. But as they climbed, Sarah paused. "Do you hear that?" she whispered, a faint tapping like something dripping on wood. They followed the sound, which led them to a charred corner of the floor. Mike lifted his flashlight and the beam revealed blackened handprints, smeared across the wall, still fresh, glistening slightly as if someone had just pressed them there. Lavra gasped, stepping back, but the floor groaned under her weight. Before anyone could react, the wood gave way. Mike shone his flashlight through the hole. "Lavra, are you okay?" But she didn't answer. The light flickered, then steadied, and they saw her standing up slowly. But something was wrong. She wasn't looking at them. She was staring straight ahead into the darkness. Then a whisper echoed through the room, low and guttural, not from her, but from somewhere behind her. "Get out." The flashlight flickered again, and in that flash they saw them. Two charred silhouettes standing just behind Lavra, unmoving, their burned faces twisted as if frozen in a silent scream. The light died. The next thing the others remembered was waking up outside, lying on the ground near the car, the mill behind them completely silent. Lavra was never found. The footage on Mike's camera showed only static until the very end, a single frame of Laura's terrified face, eyes wide, looking right into the lens. Mill was sealed off again after that night. Some say if you stand outside Carter's Mill during the fall fog, you can still hear her voice, calling for help from beneath the ground. The second story happened years later, in 2012, in another small town tucked deep in the countryside. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and fall meant pumpkin festivals, bonfires, and corn mazes. But Briar Hollow Road was a place people avoided, especially after dark. There stood an old farmhouse that had been abandoned for decades. Locals claimed it was cursed. Anyone who stayed the night there would either vanish or go insane. The story dated back to a family who had mysteriously disappeared in 1975, leaving their dinner still warm on the table. One autumn weekend, a group of paranormal investigators decided to prove, once and for all, that the house was just a myth. Team Daniel, Rebecca, Chris, and Lily brought their equipment, EMF meters, cameras, voice recorders. They entered at sunset, and the house welcomed them with silence. The air was heavy, thick with dust and decay. As they explored, Rebecca noticed something odd. Every room had claw marks etched deep into the walls, as if someone or something had been trying to escape. By midnight, they set up camp in the living room, the flicker of candlelight casting long shadows across the cracked wallpaper. Daniel began recording. "We're in the Briar Hollow house," he said, voice steady. "Locals say the family that lived here vanished without a trace. We're here to find out why. For a while, nothing happened. Then, out of nowhere, the temperature dropped. The EMF reader spiked. 'Do you feel that?' Lily whispered. And then, from the darkness of the hallway, came a faint creaking sound, footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving toward them. Chris turned the camera toward the hallway. The red light blinked as he whispered, 'Is someone there?' Silence, then a voice voice, barely audible, "Leave." They froze. Daniel stood up, stepping toward the sound. "We mean no harm. Get out." The lights flickered violently and the front door slammed shut on its own. Becca screamed as something unseen brushed past her. When she looked down, her arm had 3 deep scratches that began to bleed instantly. The EMF meter shattered. Camera captured the chaos, flickering lights, the team shouting, objects flying off shelves. And then came the laughter. It wasn't human. It was low, guttural, echoing through the house as if coming from the walls themselves. The footage ended abruptly. When the police found the house days later, there was no sign of the investigators except the camera, still recording, pointed toward the staircase. On its final recording, a faint voice whispered from the upstairs landing, "They're still here." Tools went missing, and eerie cries were heard echoing from the woods around the property. Today, nothing stands there but a patch of dead land where no grass grows, and no animals roam. Every fall, on the anniversary of the disappearance, locals claim to see candlelight flickering through the trees,